The joint hearing will come to order. It's an honor and a privilege for me to be here with Chairman Isaacson, ranking members Tester and Walls, the so-called Four Corners, and other members. Welcome you all today for a joint hearing of the House and Senate Veterans Affairs Committee to receive the legislative presentation of the Veterans of Foreign War of the United States, VFW. Thank you for all your brave and honorable service to our nation and the service that continues through your work with the VFW and your attendance here in Washington. And welcome to all the guests that are here, and so many of you traveled so far to be here with us today. I want to extend a special welcome to Commander-in-Chief Keith Harman and his wife, Mary Lou. So welcome, Commander. Thank you, sir, for your service. Thank you, Commander Harmon. It shows your good judgment to be in the U.S. Army as I was, so congratulations on that.
I'm standing with you on that.
And during the Vietnam War and your leadership at the VFW, and for being here today to share your thoughts with us. I also want to welcome VFW Auxiliary National President Dee Gilroy. And Dee, if you would stand and thank you.
Yay.
And thank you for being here and all the great work that the Auxiliary does for our veterans and their families. I'd also like to recognize the VFW members from my home state of Tennessee who are here in attendance today, especially State Commander Mike Scott, past National Commander Mr. John Fergus, Mr. Darrell McPherson, Mr. Eddie Bray, and Mr. Fred C. If you guys will stand. Thank you. Fred. I'm grateful not only to have you here this morning, but also to work with the VFW and Auxiliary and the work you do across the country every day in service to our veterans and their families. Commander, my top priority for this year will be to continue to work with my colleagues in the Congress, you and other veteran service organizations to continue our work to make necessary improvements within the VA. While we have much to be proud of through our achievements over the last year, we still have a lot of work ahead of us. I'll also continue to meet our constitutional responsibilities to provide rigorous oversight and shine light on instances where the Department falls short of what our veterans deserve. As Chairman, I will continue to foster an agenda focused on problem solving and results, bringing together stakeholders like yourselves and policymakers to build a better future for our country's veterans. We share a common mission to improve services and benefits for veterans, and everyone in this room has priorities and ideas we believe will help us provide the care and benefits our nation's veterans have earned. One of the committee's continuing priorities is consolidation and strengthening VA care in the community, ensuring we are increasing veterans' options for care while simultaneously investing in a stronger VA. We will also continue our work on improving both the quality and equity in the VA caregiver program. And I'm currently working on legislation to make these improvements and expand the program. And as you know, this effort was yesterday's focus on a joint roundtable discussion. It was a great hearing we had yesterday. I appreciate VFW's continued input, and I'm sure we'll be able to address these important issues very soon. Another means of investment in VA is our effort to establish an asset and infrastructure review process to help the department modernize and realign its medical facility footprint across the nation. The average VA building is almost my age, which is pretty old. And I was telling someone the other day, you know you're getting old, Commander, when the next dog you buy has a longer life expectancy than you do. So aligning VA's physical infrastructure to better serve veterans where they live is crucial in ensuring the future success of the VA's healthcare system. The disability claims process is yet another area where VFW's leadership is critical. We know that while the backlog of claims has been reduced, this has come at the expense of other claims. In November 2017, VA submitted its comprehensive plan outlining its progress and its timeline for implementing the new law that this Congress passed. Last week, we received VA's first update to the comprehensive plan. We need to ensure that VA stays focused and on track to implement the law so that veterans can have their claims adjudicated in a timely manner instead of waiting around for years. Last but certainly not least, my committee will continue to focus on implementation of other legislation that was signed into law this Congress to greatly expand the post-9/11 GI Bill and provide the Secretary the tools he needs to hold VA employees accountable. I'm proud to have led these efforts and to get those two bills signed into law. And I'm also committed in ensuring these laws are properly implemented by VA in a way that will best serve veterans and taxpayers alike. And we look forward to continuing our mission with your help. I'm confident that working together, the nearly 1.7 million members of the VFW and your auxiliaries, there is no challenge we can't meet on behalf of our veterans. I also want to thank you for taking time to come to Washington to share your views, and I look forward to Commander Harmon's testimony. Before I yield to Chairman Isaacson, I want to congratulate my colleague, Mr. Boss, today for his 38th wedding anniversary. He hadn't showed up yet. 38 years is no small feat, and knowing him, it is no small feat. I hope that you and Tracy enjoy another 38 years. I will now yield to Chairman Isaacson for his opening comments.
Well, Chairman Rowe, thank you very much for your leadership and for the introduction. And to everyone at the VFW, welcome. We're so delighted to have you. To the auxiliary, thanks for what you do on behalf of the VFW and the American people. Commander, welcome. We're glad that you're here today and appreciate your bringing Mr. Brown around. Senator Brown is an outstanding member of the Veterans Affairs Committee in the Senate and a good friend of mine. We're glad to welcome him to the committee today. We could not have gotten where we have gotten in the last year and a half without the VFW and the various Veterans Service Organizations. I had a call last night from the President of the United States to thank me, to tell you, the committee, how much he appreciates the emphasis on veterans improvement and reform in the VA and encouraged us to finish our job on care in the community and choice to see to it we have a 100% batting average in the first 2 years of his first administration. I appreciate that call very much and gave the credit where it was due, first to the VSOs for their united support, every one of them. Second, to the committees in both the House and Senate for their work. And third, to the American people who appreciate the veterans who give us all that we have today and fought for it and defended it for us, and we're grateful to them. To that end, I also know we have a number of Georgians in the audience from the VFW. The Georgia VFW folks stand for just a minute, or wave. There you go. Thank you so much for what you do in Georgia and what you do in the country for our veterans and for the Veterans Administration. Secondly, we are where we are today, which is 10 of the 11 goals we set out a year and a half ago to pass, we've passed, in large measure because of the VSOs and because of the committees, but also because of David Shulkin. And I want to just publicly acknowledge the great help that the Secretary of Veterans Administration has been to the committee, what a breath of fresh air he's been to us in Congress, how much I enjoy working with him in the past, how much I look forward to working with him in the future, because hand in hand, arm in arm, with strong support from the President, with a great Secretary of the Veterans Administration and the Cabinet, and with two good committees who are committed to supporting the Veterans Administration, there is nothing that we can't do that we need to do, and we're going to get that done. I'm not going to touch on all the things that Chairman Rowe did, except to say that we finally got an appeals modernization bill through that's working in the early stages. It's reducing the wait times on appeals, and that's a good thing. We got the new GI Bill that's been done. The accountability is actually taking place now, and we're seeing the results of accountability by better performance and us having the right people on the right job and getting the wrong people on the wrong job out, and that's been very important to do, and your support for that has been very important. We have more to do on choice and more to do on care in the community, and I'm committed to finishing that, and hopefully we'll finish it in the weeks ahead of this particular session. But to all of you who have served this country and who serve it today representing the VFW, as a veteran service organization, thank you for your service to your country. Thank you for being with us today. Chairman Rowe, thank you for your service in the House, and to all the members of the committee, thank you for supporting everything we're doing.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Isaacson. And I'll now yield to Ranking Member Walls, who was late yesterday, where a 2-inch Minnesota snow kept him from getting back. So I'll yield to him.
I have lost all street credibility now as a proud Northerner. But Commander, welcome. To all of you, welcome, and I wish you could see this site from up here. I oftentimes say this is one of the best days in Congress. I know that's a pretty low bar, but it truly is it truly is, and I often think of two things. I think of what would happen if you were not here, if you had not taken the time and the effort to be engaged the way you are. And then I think the loss would be is that I always view when you're here as being the conscience of America. And it always seems like that expression through your commander and through the will of the people is very clear. And I also want to say a thank you to these folks up here. As you heard the list, and the chairman is right, that does not happen by chance, and it does not happen in Congress by chance. It's very, very difficult to do the things that were listed there, but we did it in partnership. And there was a little story in the New York Times last summer that said, if you want to know how Congress is supposed to work, look at the VA committee. And I attest to that because of the partnership that we've developed with you and because of the leadership of the folks setting up here wanting to get this right for America. So, Commander, I know you have an awesome responsibility, but if you see what I see, you got an awful lot of folks got your back there, and they got the backs of America's veterans. I want to point out a couple things. First of all, the Minnesotans who are now ashamed of me for getting snowed in St. Cloud, I want to thank you for being here, and I usually make a joke about winter, but after missing a flight, those are out the door. But I'd also like to note yesterday, and something that the VFW is helping lead on, I think is very important, Miss Christina Keenan, who's originally a Minnesotan, is here as a member of the Women's Advisory Committee today, and I think that's a really important thing that you're doing and that we're pushing forward on that, so welcome. And also something that VFW has been doing with SVA. We have 9 fellows here today. They come from college campuses around the country to learn involved in veterans advocacy. I'd like those fellows, if they're here, to stand up, if they could. So. How many? That's what the future looks like, and your commitment to getting them here and getting them engaged, and to each of you for taking the time. It really does matter. I always get asked when people ask me, you guys can sit if you want to, but they ask if is Congress is like House of Cards, and I say, no, it's like Forrest Gump. Stuff just happens. I don't know why it happens. It just does. It truly is about who's here and who's advocating. And those pieces of legislation were advocated by you. We worked together to get them done. We're improving the quality of life for all American veterans. But what we also know is this is paramount to national security, to showing that we will care for those who are willing to serve this nation. And I'm just proud to be a part of it. So thank you all for being here, and I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding. I'll now yield to the Ranking Member Tester for his opening comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome Commander Harman, and I also want to welcome Senator Brown. You've got a good man to your left, Commander Harman, and it's good to have him on this committee and good to have him introducing you. I just want to start by, and Bob Wallace has probably heard this story before, but some of you may not. When I was growing up in the 60s, my school bus driver was a member of the VFW. And in the late 60s, he asked me to be the VFW bugler that played taps at funerals. And it was an incredibly high honor, and it's one of the highlights of my life as I look back. And to be able to play and give the highest honor to the folks who have served this country has been something that sticks with me, and occasionally I still do it when they need a trumpeter, because I think a live bugle is really important at funerals. And I just want to tell you, that wouldn't have happened without a member of your group, who, by the way, is still alive today. He's in his 90s now and still trucking along, World War II vet. And it wouldn't have happened with the VFW. So I just want to say thank you from a personal standpoint. We've got a few Montana folks. I hope they're here today. They said, I met with them yesterday. They said they were going to be here today. Chuck Carroll, a state commander, would you stand and have your crew stand for Montana?
Yeah.
All right.
Big sky. I can see him clear back.
Yeah. That's good. Good to have you guys here. Look, we've talked about what we've been able to get done over the last 15 months, and it's been very, very significant. It wouldn't have been done without you. The input that the VSOs have given, the VFW in particular, has been critically important as we move forward, making the VA all it can be. We have our challenges, and I can tell you that we don't have enough medical professionals within the VA. We need to really focus on making sure that the VA does their job and hires the folks we need to take care of you and your comrades. It's critically important. We also need to make sure that women veterans are taken care of. This is the fastest growing group of veterans in the country, and the VA needs to accommodate the needs that are out there because it's critically important. Other than that, I can assure you of one thing for sure, and that is the folks at this dais, whether they be in the House or the Senate, are going to continue to work very, very hard, taking our cues from you, making sure we're doing right by the folks who protect this country and serve in our military. Thank you all for being here. I look forward to this hearing. Thank you, Commander Harman. I yield.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding. Now recognize Bob Wallace, if you'll introduce the panelists with us today, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Senate and House Veterans Affairs Committees. I am honored to have the privilege of introducing the national officers of the Veterans of Foreign Wars in our auxiliary. Mr. Chairman, please allow me to ask those to be introduced to please remain standing, and I wish to request the audience to hold their applause until all have been introduced. National President of our auxiliary, Dee Guillory, from Virginia, and her husband, Mark. Senior Vice President of our auxiliary, Sandy Crable of Maryland. Junior Vice President, Peggy Haki from Hawaii. National Auxiliary Secretary-Treasurer, Jan Passmore from Michigan. Commander-in-Chief's wife, Mary Lou Harman from Ohio. Senior Vice Commander-in-Chief's wife, Mary Lawrence from New Mexico. Auxiliary Legislative Ambassador Carmelita Jones from Idaho. Senior Vice Commander-in-Chief Vincent B.J. Lawrence from New Mexico. Junior Vice Commander-in-Chief William J. Doc Schmidt from New York. Adjutant General Brian Duffy from Kentucky. Quartermaster General Deborah Anderson from Missouri. Judge Advocate General Dana Hussey from New Hampshire. Surgeon General Patrick Doc Higgins from Pacific areas. National Chaplain Reverend James Gray from Georgia. National Chief of Staff Roger Fry from Ohio. Inspector General Bill Backus from Wisconsin. Chairman of the National Legislative Committee Richard Morrison from Nebraska. Director of the National Legislative Service Carlos Fuentes from Maryland. Director of National Veterans Service Ryan Gallucci from Maryland. I would also like to recognize again the VFW SVA Fellows, the Women Veterans Committee, and our past commanders and chiefs who are in attendance with us today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Bob, thank you, and it's now my privilege and honor to yield to Senator Brown, who has the honor of introducing National Commander-in-Chief Keith Harmon. Senator, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is an honor to welcome Keith Harmon, and I will introduce him in a moment. I want to thank the chairman, thank Chairman Isaacs, and thanks very much, my longtime friend, Senator Tester, for your leadership on the Veterans Committee and the way that you and Johnny Isaac can work so well. As Ranking Member Wall said, the Veterans Committee is different from really any other committee in the Senate, in the House. We work together. I was saying to Commander Harmon, we do these joint hearings. No other committees do House-Senate hearings like this. And the bipartisan cooperation where Senator Tester and Senator Isaacson set the tone really matters to all of us. It's my pleasure to introduce Keith Harmon, Commander-in-Chief of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, a native of Delphus, Ohio, close to the Indiana border. Commander Harmon was generous enough earlier this year late last year to testify at a hearing of the Senate Veterans Committee held in Columbus, Ohio last year. Senator Isaacson and Senator Tester and their staffs particularly were so helpful in allowing us to do that field hearing where Commander-in-Chief Harmon testified. We heard directly from veterans about the difficulties they face transitioning from active duty to civilian life. Joining us today, too, Mr. Chairman, if I could, are VFW State Commander Robert Giannone Sr., Vice Commander David Root, Women Veterans Advisory Committee member Carrie Pfeiffer, National Council member Chuck Keller, and National Legislative Committee Vice Chair and longtime friend of mine, Larry Moore. We met earlier. I appreciate the work they do. Commander Harmon served a combat tour as a Huey crew chief and door gunner. Like so many other veterans, his service to his community and his country did not end when he returned home. Commander Harmon served as a union representative while he worked at Fruhoff Trailer Corporation, where he worked to improve the conditions of his brothers and sisters in the union to ensure they had a better life. Then in 1991, he became a Veterans Service Officer in Van Wert County, Ohio. Not all states are lucky enough to have Veterans Service Officers in Ohio, 88 counties, but each of their counties. Ohio's honored to have that, and Commander Harmon was so important there. He called that profession at the Veterans Service Commission in Van Wert County his calling. He served veterans in that role for 20 years. Since 1983, Commander Harmon has been a strong advocate for his fellow veterans through the VFW, first from his post 3035 in Delphus, Ohio, later through his role as Ohio Department Commander, now as Commander-in-Chief. It's no surprise that he has led the VFW under the motto, service, not self. since that is how Keith Harman has lived his life. He has been married 50 years to Mary Lou, and like so many of the men and women behind me, so many in this room, his family has a long history of service. His grandfather served in World War I. His father and his aunt served in World War II, and he served in Vietnam. On behalf of the 800,000 veterans in my state, many of them members of this organization, many of them in other veteran service organizations, it's my pleasure to introduce Commander Harmon for his insightful testimony. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you again, Senator. Thank you again.
I have to sit up there. They won't let me sit here.
Okay, okay, all right.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Thank you for your introduction. And Commander, you are now recognized for your testimony.
Thank you. And thank you again, Senator Brown, for that kind introduction. And to Chairman Isaacson and Rowe, ranking members Tester and Waltz, it is my honor to represent the 1.7 million members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States and its auxiliary. As National Commander, I've had the privilege of visiting VFW posts across the nation who continue to serve as the pillars of their communities and listen to their veterans discuss the struggles of obtaining timely care and benefits. I've also traveled the world and heard our troops stationed abroad discuss how the actions or inactions of Congress impact their moral ability to fight America's enemies. I visited VA medical centers who don't have enough staff to provide veterans the timely care that they deserve because they can't stretch the dollars far enough. And they wish that they had additional funding to hire more doctors and expand the capability to serve more veterans. I've also seen firsthand how sequestration has caused our brave men and women in uniform to doubt whether they'll be ready to deploy into harm's way because they lack the necessary training. Sequestration has also led to the erosion of quality of life programs that ensure that they keep their heads in the fight instead of wondering whether their families back home will have the support programs that they need. We are a nation at war. This is why I have made ending sequestration my #1 priority goal. While the VFW has pleased Congress recently passed the bipartisan budget agreement to alleviate its impact on our military and veterans, you have merely delayed sequestration by 2 years. The good news is that the bipartisan budget agreement created a super committee to reform the dysfunctional and cumbersome budget process, which endangers the national security and fails America's veterans. Our service members, veterans, and their families are counting on you to repeal sequestration once and for all. Another issue that directly impacts the well-being of VFW members and the lack of timely access to care that they have earned. Over the past 4 years, VFW has assisted hundreds of veterans who face delays in receiving their health care through the VA and has surveyed more than 30,000 veterans on their preference, opinions, and experiences navigating both the VA and private sector health care systems. Results from our most recent survey, which was launched a week ago and has already received 8,000 responses, show that 80% of our VFW members use VA care. Nearly 60% of them choose to stay with VA when given the option to use private care. And VA doctors understand their service-connected conditions better than private care doctors. While 64% of our members report noticing improvements or say that their VA medical facilities don't need to improve, they do report that the VA must improve access, customer service, and eliminate inconsistencies. The VFW thanks these committees for making necessary changes to the choice program that the VFW has proposed. you have provided access to care for veterans. You have improved access to care for veterans. However, the Choice Program is only a stopgap and must be replaced with a permanent and improved community care system which would ensure veterans receive timely access to high-quality and veteran-centric care, consolidate VA's different community care programs into one easy-to-understand and administer program, and consolidate funding under one account. To be clear, any bill to improve how veterans access private sector care must also correct problems at VA medical facilities. This is why the VFW calls on Congress to pass the Caring for Our Veterans Act, which would ensure veterans have timely access to high-quality care and tailored to their unique needs. The VFW thanks Senator Isaacson and Tester for their leadership in crafting a bill that is aligned with the views of our nation's veterans and incorporates the input of committee members and VA, and we know that that's not been busy. The VFW also strongly supports the full expansion of caregiver benefits to veterans of all eras. As a multi-generational organization with roots tracing back to the Spanish-American War and members from every war and contingency operation through Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria, the VFW believes it is disgraceful that Congress has failed to properly recognize the sacrifices of those who have put their lives on hold for their pre-9/11 veterans. Congress can correct this inequity with passage of the Caring for Veterans Act. The VFW also supports many common-sense proposals included in the President's budget request, such as closing the loopholes that allows flight schools to charge exorbitant fees for flight training, authorizing VA doctors to practice medicine across state lines, inscribing veterans' headstones to honor their spouses and dependent children. However, the VFW condemns efforts to nickel and dime veterans by reducing their annual cost of living adjustments, which are already too low. Veterans cannot be required to give up one benefit for another or forego their benefits to expand programs for other veterans. The VFW supports Secretary Shulkin's decision to adopt the same electronic health care records as DOD to ensure truly integrated care as service members transition from the military health care system to the VA care. However, the VFW does not support VA's proposal to fund EHR modernization at the expense of health care veterans have earned. Congress must ensure VA is appropriated the funds it needs for this important initiative. Over the past 2 years, the VFW members around the world have taken an active role in addressing the serious issue among our nation's veterans being suicide. The VFW posts have hosted nearly 300 community service events to destigmatize mental health by teaching our local communities how to identify mental distress and what local resources are available to those struggling to cope. The VFW and our partners will continue our outreach efforts to make sure veterans know where to turn when they need help. We are also committed to assisting VA, DOD, and DHS in meeting the President's challenge of reducing the rate of suicide among our recently discharged veterans. We ask that Congress give VA the authorities and resources it needs to meet the demands on its mental health care services. To meet the needs of the fastest-growing population within the veterans community, Congress must ensure women veterans have access to health care professionals and services that properly recognize their service to our nation. Gender-specific services, including expanded postnatal care, peer-to-peer services to empower women veterans to support their fellow veterans overcome mental health crises and homelessness. For more than 118 years, the VFW has led the charge to improve and protect veterans' benefits and compensation. In recent months, the VFW has heard grumblings that VA disability compensation does not encourage wellness or that veterans abuse the system. Those claims are flat out false, and the VFW will fight this narrative as we have done since our inception. We thank these committees for your continued commitment to veterans and for passing bills to improve their benefits, such as the Appeals Modernization Act, which has started to offer veterans the opportunity to receive faster decisions in a non-adversarial manner. The VFW is glad VA is working side by side with VSOs to properly implement the Appeals Modernization Act. Together, we will make sure veterans no longer wait 3 to 5 years for an appeal. While we thank you for the progress made, you still have a long to-do list. The VFW has long argued that military retired pay and VA service-connected disability compensation are fundamentally different benefits and granted for different reasons. We again call on Congress to enact full concurrent receipts. VFW members have been exposed to toxins during every war. These toxins have long-lasting impacts on their health and the well-being of their descendants. This is why the VFW urges Congress to properly recognize Blue Water Navy veterans who suffer from Agent Orange-related health conditions. Ensure veterans that served in Thailand and along the Korean DMZ receive the benefits they deserve. Fix how VA rates Gulf War illness claims. Improve the burn pit registry, and commission an independent research on Fort McClellan open burn pits, Gulf War illness, and infertility among women veterans who have deployed to the Gulf War. While America's sacred promise to recover fallen Americans from long ago battlefields is not under the jurisdiction of these committees, I must emphasize the importance of the POW-MIA full accounting mission. I have seen the hard work and dedication the Defense POW-MIA Accounting Agency has for our fallen heroes, and Congress must provide DPAA the resources it needs to reunite our heroes with their loved ones, including budget carryover authority to ensure DPAA continues the recovery missions during a government shutdown. In closing, I would be remiss if I did not mention the Forever GI Bill, which has made significant improvements to education benefits for veterans and their families and gives them a lifetime to use those benefits. The Forever GI Bill was also a template on how Congress can come together to pass bipartisan and comprehensive legislation to improve the lives of those who have worn our nation's uniform. We hope Congress can do the same to enact budget reform that ends sequestration, improve access to high-quality health care, eliminate suicides, improve benefits, ease the military from civilian to transition, and end homelessness for veterans. The VFW stands ready to assist whenever and wherever possible and hold you accountable if need be, because every day is Veterans Day, and no one does more for veterans than the veterans of foreign wars of the United States. Good job. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Commander, and appreciate your testimony. And because we have a large panel today, I'm going to limit to 3 minutes, and I'm going to stick to that 3-minute time limit. And if we need a second round, then we can stick around for a second round. I'll now yield to Senator Isaacson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and out of respect for that request, I'll be even shorter than that because I've already had some minutes to talk, and I appreciate that time. But let me say this. My friend from Maine just whispered in my ear, I want a guy like Commander Harmon in my foxhole next time I'm in combat. Your testimony is eloquent, focused, and challenging, and your leadership to help support us in what we've tried to do in the past year has helped us get to where we are. With your help in the future and your continued enthusiasm, we'll get where you want to go in the future.
We'll be happy to assist you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Now yield to Ranking Member Walz.
I'm going to yield my time to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. O'Rourke.
Thank you. Thank you both. Do we have any Texans? Can you all rattle your spurs or make some noise? Yeah. Thank you all for being here. My chairman on the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee, Jody Arrington, and I hosted a no-expense-spared donut breakfast for our Texans yesterday. Grateful to everyone who came out and for the conversation that we were able to have. And the reminder that you gave us that we need to continue in a bipartisan way forward on all of the critical issues that Commander Harmon just raised. And you really lit a fire under us and continue to be our inspiration and our guide on the work that we have before this committee. So I thank you for that. Commander, I wonder if you would address just one of the many important issues that you raised, and that is veteran suicide. At a time that the VA estimates the conservative numbers, 20 veterans today will take their own lives. 14 of those 20 will have been unable or were unwilling to go to a VA to see a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And the rate of suicide amongst those veterans who have bad paper discharge, other than honorable discharge, is twice as high as the general veterans population. What is your guidance for this committee going forward to make sure that we significantly reduce the rate of veteran suicide? And I'll just add in closing, while I have a chance to listen to you, that I'm grateful for President Trump's nomination of David Shulkin in the service of the Secretary, who's made reducing veteran suicide his #1 clinical priority. So I want to get your advice and guidance on how we expand upon that.
We need to find out those veterans who commit suicide that do not use VA health care. We need to know whether those individuals are receiving mental health care on the outside from private practice. We as an organization have partnered with Given Our patients like me, Walgreens, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and we have encouraged our VFW posts around the world to open their doors to their communities, invite their community members in, bring mental health providers in to make people aware of the 5 signs of mental health conditions. Many veterans won't come, but the families will, and they're affected as equally as well. So we encourage that, and we just need to find more information about those veterans that are committing suicide that are not using VA.
Well, we look forward to continuing to work with you on this and grateful for all of your leadership on this issue so far. So thank you, Mr. Commander. I yield back to the chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding. Senator Tester, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will yield to the person who fights for the caregiver legislation more than anybody else in the United States Senate, Patty Murray.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And let me just thank all of you for being here today and for the VFW's continued support for the Caregivers Program and our efforts to expand the benefit to pre-9/11 caregivers. Although they are not yet eligible for this program, many of your members are currently receiving caregiver services from a close friend or a loved one. And while the need of each veteran varies significantly, a RAND Corporation study on pre-9/11 caregivers found that only 39% of caregivers live in the veteran's home while providing caregiver services to their veteran. And in addition to that, more than 1/3 of all pre-9/11 caregivers are the children of the veteran and often have a family of their own. So we can't overlook the sacrifices of family caregivers who are serving our veterans merely because they don't live under the same roof as the veteran. Do you believe that a caregiver should be required to reside with the veteran in order to be eligible for the benefits of this program?
Well, it would certainly make it more feasible for them to be living in the home in which the veteran's receiving the care. you want to follow up, Carlos?
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief. It certainly does make it easier, but it should not be a requirement by law. It can be done. It doesn't have to be in the same home, as long as they're providing care and that we can assure that they're doing so, and it's assisting the veteran. It does not matter if they live at.
Especially if it's a child with a family of their own who does all of the work but has to care for their family as well. As you know, the VA has recently supported increasing the number of activities of daily living, known as ADLs, required to be eligible for the caregivers program. But as the current program recognizes, veterans with an inability to perform even one ADL still have significant caregiving needs. The members of your organization and their caregivers know that firsthand, and they can attest to the emotional, mental, physical, and financial burdens of caring often over the span of decades, for a one ADL veteran. Can you discuss, or someone on your panel discuss, the difficulty of providing care for someone with an inability to perform even one ADL?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chief. Again, this is a matter of ensuring that a doctor is able to determine whether a veteran needs caregiving assistance. And eligibility should be based on that, whether they need assistance and how labor intensive that care is required to be. Not necessarily whether you meet one or two or three. It's based on whether that doctor believes that this veteran needs the support of a caregiver.
So arbitrarily setting a number of ADLs may not and will not reflect the actual needs of that veteran.
Correct, ma'am.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlelady, for yielding in for correction of the record. Mr. Warwick, who's a good friend, there would not be a Texas if we're not for Tennessee. I want to point that out. And we're now ready for a 3-minute public service announcement from Maine from Mr. Pollock. So, right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, Mr. Chairman, we get picked on all the time in the great state of Maine. We are a small state, but, sir, we are a great state. And as a result of that, I would like to ask Steve San Pedro, Andre Dumas, Dan Williams, and Chris Armstrong, they're here today from the great state of Maine. If you are, please stand up and be recognized. Now, some, Mr. Chairman, might believe that the reason these nice fellows came down is because tonight we're receiving 18 inches of snow. I can tell you that is not the case, but they may be here for another couple days as a result of this. And I know that Commander Fern and his wife Nellie are not feeling well today. We were in the office with them yesterday, sir, but they're not here today, but we wish them well. Mr. Chairman, the state of Maine has the second highest percent of our population that are veterans. We love our veterans in the state of Maine. I represent the rural part of Maine. Some folks say, well, Bruce, isn't that redundant? I said, no, we have a couple towns that are above 25 or 30,000. I represent about 400 towns in the rural part of our state, and let me tell you, we love our veterans. I am very concerned, Commander, and I would love to have you comment on this, or one of your associates. How do we deal with access to rural care, or care rather, for our veterans that live in rural areas? Now, I'm a big supporter of the CHOICE program. It got its start with the ARCH program in Aroostook County that Senator Collins was very instrumental in working on. And in no way, and I want to make this very clear to everybody that's here today, in no way do I advocate, and I'm sure the folks on the committee advocate in any way replacing the VA. This is to augment the VA. This is not to privatize the VA. It's to augment the VA. And the reason for that, Commander, is we may have someone that lives up in Fort Kent, Maine, and tonight when the wind's going to be blowing sideways and they're not feeling well and they've got a 5-hour drive to Togus down in Augusta, it might not make sense for them to make the trip. So I think it's great if they're able to get their health care closer to home. That's what I am focused on, represent our rural veterans in Maine and throughout the country. Do you think there is anything I'm missing, Commander, with respect to this issue? And in your opinion, what is the most important issue facing our veterans that live in rural America?
The travel distance to a VA medical facility, and one of the, I think one of the ways they could prove that is to increase the telehealth care. A veteran could take a picture of if he has a rash or whatever, he can take a picture of it and send it to the VA through the telehealth program. some physician or nursing staff can take a look at that and can prescribe something. They ought to be able to do it through Skype or something at their computer at their home.
Any of the other fellows on the committee want to weigh in on this? Mr. Fuentes?
I'll be happy to. Thank you for the question. And the VFW was supportive of ARCH. It was great to see that it was incorporated into the Choice program, and certainly want to make sure that rural veterans are able to access care if it's not through telehealth or being able to access VA medical facilities, getting care close to home. It's key.
Thank you all very much for giving us our freedom and our country. We are indebted and grateful to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carlton. Dr. Colonel Lindstrom, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I'm a proud life member. When I returned from Iraq and I got to Fort McCoy, they were right there in the PX. And I said, oh, that's right. I guess I am eligible now to be a member of the VFW. So I joined right away. And as an Ohioan, I'm very pleased to see Ohio so well represented within the VFW in many capacities. And I would like to see all the Ohioans stand up and be recognized. And I want to welcome you to D.C. Thank you all. So on the issue of health care, as I chair the health subcommittee on the VA, I also serve on Armed Services Committee and on the Personnel Committee. And I just want you to know there's a couple of things. You know, we've had a lot of doctors involved with the VA in the last couple of terms, and our focus is that there is access to care. That is the primary goal. There's a physician shortage, there's caregiver shortages all across the country, and so we are very much challenged. But I can tell you, across the board in these committees, we are determined to do everything we can to have our veterans have access to care and get care, hopefully within the walls of the VA. But if not, we want care to be the priority. And also we want to make sure that decisions that are being made as far as health care can be made between the doctor and the patient.
Absolutely.
That is a priority because that's who should have the say-so. So we deal with some of that. But also being on armed services as well, I want to assure you how much we are working on in every capacity, trying to make sure that when you wear this uniform, all of you wore the uniform before you joined the VFW, you had that role. We want to make sure that there is a smooth transition in every capacity, going from uniform to being a veteran, not only with your health care, but your quality of life. And so those are the issues we're working on, and we appreciate your support and standing with us as we make these movements towards a better quality of life and access to care for our veterans from day one, from the day they're recruited till the day they pass on. And I want to thank you all for your service here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Takano, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to know if there are any Californians in the room today. Hey! Well, welcome. And let me just say, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Commander Harmon, for your testimony this morning and all the important work that the VFW does for advocating and supporting veterans. I always value the VFW's work to survey its members and help us understand their preferences and what is or isn't working with the VA. Your survey, our CARE Survey 2018, found that 87% of veterans who use VA care would recommend it to their fellow veterans. I want you to know that this member hears you loud and clear. You fought for the United States of America, not Blue Cross Blue Shield. You fought for the red, white, and blue, and we need to preserve the traditional coordinating role of the VA for care and not privatize the VA.
Absolutely.
So, thank you. And as far as a critical need that we need to fill is we need to expand the number of graduate medical education slots. That is a key part of why the 30,000 positions that are unfilled at the VA are not filled. We don't have enough personnel, and I think that's a top priority. Now, I think it's a mistake also to try and change the subject and to pick on federal employee unions. I participated in passing a compromise bill on accountability. We have seen action taken against employees who are not accountable, but there's been an attempt to, I think, villainize federal official time, and I just want to clarify something. Federal law prohibits the use of official time to conduct internal union business. Instead, it is used to ensure workplace safety, develop employee training, and improve workplace processes and working conditions. These, in turn, help improve the care and service we provide to veterans. Eliminating or restricting official time will not solve the workforce challenges at the VA. We should be looking at how the VA recruits and retains employees, strengthens HR. HR is one of the weak links in the VA and its ability to fill those slots. We should be investing in graduate medical education medical residencies is another way to say it, and so many other policies that are proven to help improve the workplace. And I want you to remember that roughly 1/3 of all VA employees are veterans themselves, and they deserve safe workplaces, fair working conditions, and they want training to help them do their jobs more effectively. And it's easy to misrepresent official time as wasteful and harmful to veterans, but in reality, it also is for the benefit of our veterans who work at the VA, and they deserve fairness just like any other employee. So thank you.
Thank you.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I'll now yield to my good friend, Senator Bozeman from Arkansas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate you, Commander, and very much appreciate the team that you have here working so very hard for veterans and do a great job. I want to give a big shout out to those of you from Arkansas, and you might stand up so we can. Thank you. We do appreciate you all. We had a great meeting yesterday, and like the rest of the crew here, you do a great job of really making in my case, the Arkansas delegation aware of what's going on at home. Nobody knows better than the grassroots as you all are visiting with your buddies as to where the problems are. The problems in Maine, the problems in Arkansas, the problems in California are somewhat different because of geography. But again, thank you so much for doing that. One of the things they focused on yesterday was sequestration. I appreciate you bringing that up right at the top of the list. That's something that we're working hard to get rectified. It's certainly no way to run a government, and we need to do a much better job of that. I'd like to ask you very quickly for any ideas. One of the things that we're grappling with so very hard is veteran suicide. We're spending a tremendous amount of money on it. We can be proud of that, but sadly, the numbers have stayed the same. They're not going down. You know, they're staying the same, maybe increasing a little bit. So I'd like to ask you, in your experience, you mentioned Commander telemedicine. That's actually working, you know, somewhat in this, and again, anything that you can do to bring people together is a good thing. I'd like for you to tell me a little bit about what you feel like some of the programs that are doing a good job, some perhaps that aren't, and then also if you can think about some of the metrics that we need to put in place to actually start measuring these things, you know, measuring the programs, where we need to spend additional money, where we need to spend perhaps no money or not as much money in programs that aren't working. Bob?
Thank you, Senator. I think the program that we put together a year ago and have worked on for the past 2 years now is what needs to happen. We've committed to do everything we can to destigmatize the fact that somebody needs help. Post-traumatic stress disorder, if you have it, you got to reach out to you and got to get your care. We've partnered with some of the best organizations there are, mental health, through Give an Hour, where they bring in clinicians. Walgreens will bring in clinicians to us. The VA is a partner of ours, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation for Caregivers. And we have community service projects going on where we bring the community in and do something good for the community and at the same time have a conversation about mental health. I think that government can't do it all. It has to be all of us together talking to people. And, you know, you and I know open heart surgery wasn't something anybody talked about years ago.
Sure.
But now, today, we talk about it. Same thing with cancer and other things. We've got to get that conversation going more open with about mental health. And I think that it has to take organizations like ours out there in the community. The government has great programs with the clinicians and so forth, but they can't do it all. It has to be at the local grassroots level, and that's what we're trying to do.
No, I appreciate that, and I think you make a great point. Government's got the want to, but organizations like yourself have the heart. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding, and I have had the privilege of visiting both VA hospitals in Arkansas. I appreciate the invite for having me there. I will now yield to Mr. Correa from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank all of your service, all of you here for service to a great country. And Commander, if I can, I just want to say I'm from the state of California, home to the greatest number of veterans in this great union. Our Californians, again, a round of applause, please, for them. And to all of you here, especially my California delegation, just want to let you know that I work for you, and I'm here to listen, and I'm here to learn from you. You know, back home, meet with a lot of my veterans, and a lot of them talk to me about their invisible scars that they bring back from serving our country. And a lot of them have recently been telling me that they don't want opioids. They don't want those drugs in their bodies, and they prefer medical cannabis. And Mr. Commander, and all of you here, I'd like to know, what is your opinion on this issue?
I think there is a lot of talk about additional treatment programs for post-traumatic stress, and I think that there needs to be a lot more research done in that aspect, especially with medical cannabis. I know in my own state of Ohio, there is a facility in the northwest part of Ohio that does, they kind of specialize in hyperbaric chamber treatments. And my VFW department has paid for 4 or 5 individuals to go up there, and there's been a combination of TBI, PTSD, and they have gone through these treatment programs with a considerable amount of success. So there are other things that we need to be looking at and exploring and doing research to see how feasible it is to do that, to do other treatment programs.
Mr. Commander, I think I hear your marching orders. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I yield, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding. And also, Mr. Correa, thank you for your service in California as the lead on the Senate side of the VA in California. He's a very experienced member of our group. And I'll now yield to Senator Tester, ranking.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was hoping the congressman from Maine would stick around because I need to set the record straight. According to the American Enterprise Institute of November 6, 2017, the top 3 states per capita for veterans were Alaska, #1, Montana, #2, and Maine was somewhere down the list. At any rate, Commander Harmon, thank you again for being here today. We've got a bill called Caring for Our Veterans you're very familiar with, and you've been a great supporter of it, and we thank you for it. You talked in your opening statement about the fact that we need to fix choice, but we also need to invest within the VA to make sure the VA can meet the needs of our veterans. Can you talk about that investment and where we should be focusing on as far as building the VA?
I think, as our surveys have indicated, our veterans, they prefer using the VA's healthcare system. However, with that being said, we also know that the VA cannot provide all the services that are needed. So with regards to that, you're going to have to use private sector, but it has to be up to the veteran and or his primary care physician to determine whether that care is received by the VA or outsourced to the private practice. It has to be that way. VA knows how to treat service-connected conditions, whether for whatever illness that individual happens to have, but it needs to be between that veteran and his primary care physician to determine where that care is received.
Well, thank you, Commander. And I would just add to that very quickly, and then I'll yield, is the fact that I don't know what it's like in other places of the country, but I think it's the same. Where in our great state of Montana, where we have a lot of veterans and it is rural, our VA doesn't have enough docs, period. Whether it's general practitioners or whether it's folks that are psychiatrists or psychologists. And I really hope that the VA really gets aggressive. We've given them the tools over the last 15 months to be able to recruit and retain these folks, and they really need to step it up in a big, big way. Our veterans are counting on it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the VFW. God bless you all.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Sullivan, you're recognized.
Thank you all for being here. You always got to do the bragging part before you get started here. I heard the gentleman from Montana talk about the per capita numbers in Montana, and a buddy of mine, Dan Sullivan from Alaska, reminds me he's got the highest per capita, and I remind him I got more veterans than they got people. 10% of our state, about 1 million people, are veterans. And I would actually like to ask here in the audience, if you're from North Carolina or you spend any quality time in North Carolina at Fort Bragg or Camp Lejeune, anywhere else, just raise your hand or stand if you're able. But I love North Carolina for a variety of reasons, but on the veterans issue, it's a great place to understand both sides of the issues on providing care. 50% of our population's in urban areas, 50% of our population's in rural areas. And what we've got to recognize is, number one, the bedrock of the VA health system are brick and mortar presences where veterans can be provided care. I have staff in my state that are tasked with going out to places where veterans congregate to try and create casework. And one of those places are VA centers, to where you can help them get through the care they're getting, but try and cut back the paperwork and the red tape that they have to go through to get the quality care that they need. But I think we all agree that we're going to have a good brick and mortar presence that we need to even make better. We're going to have non-VA care that's a critical part of it in consultation with the primary care physician. And in cases where the best service is out in the community, we've got to figure out how to give that veteran, in consultation with their doctor, the choice. At the end of the day, it's providing care to people who have served our nation. So we want to continue to work with you on that, and I believe that we're making progress. We have a lot more. Senator Tester's gone. I also wanted to personally thank him for the work he's done. He and I have been meeting with the head of the VA almost monthly for the last 2 years, going into 3 years now, trying to track the day-to-day changes that they're making. And we're always looking for your insight on how to do that better. And there are things that we've made progress on. We have to make more. The Camp Lejeune contaminated water, the presumptive decisions down there to provide veterans care is very important. Burn pits is another thing that I've spent time on with Senator Klobuchar. I think that we've got to figure out how we can let the benefit of the doubt go to the veteran when we believe that they need the care, and we need your help on that. And finally, I never miss an opportunity to speak with veterans to tell you that we know there are a lot more veterans out there that need help. And we've got to figure out how to get to them. Whether it's a veteran with bad paper, he may have had traumatic brain injury, some sort of service-connected challenge that resulted in bad paper. And now, right now, to the veterans or to the VA's credit, they are providing emergency mental health treatment. But there's so much more that we need to do. So you all help me while we're trying to fix the problem with the VA. Try and help me reach out to those veterans in North Carolina, those million and the millions across the country, give them the care they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Custer, you recognized.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rowe, and great to be here. I'm going to brag very briefly on the great state of New Hampshire, first in the nation in the presidential primary, and thank you to my New Hampshire vets for being with me, and I'm proudly wearing my no sequestration button on your behalf. So. Thanks for a great visit yesterday. So I'm just going to dive right in because I only have 3 minutes. So I'm with you on the no sequestration. I want to talk about the choice. I've had a lot of conversations these 2 weeks with the veterans that are coming into from New Hampshire, and obviously meeting all the time with our vets at home, about how we find this balance, this fulcrum of community care where we don't inadvertently slide into privatization and lose the support going forward of Congress and the taxpayers to help our veterans and give you everything you need. So that's my focus. In New Hampshire, I've got a rural district, but we have some wonderful agencies that I would really like to team up with, and I think this could help all over the country. And those are our federally qualified health centers, FQHCs, that exist in underserved areas, many in rural parts of the country. And these facilities are required to see everyone, regardless of ability to pay, and required to provide mental health, as you discussed, and substance use counseling. We're sadly number one, now number 2 or 3 in the nation for deaths from the opioid epidemic, number 1 for deaths from fentanyl, the synthetic opioid. So this is crucial for us, and our veterans are being treated in these. And I'd love to have you take a look at our legislation that would open up to work collaboratively for the VA to be able to serve veterans' needs locally, regionally, in these FQHCs as an extension of the network. And I'd be happy to, Kevin Diamond from my team and I would be happy to work with all of you. Dr. Rowe had some kind words for my bill the other day, so I'm very excited about the possibility of working together in a bipartisan way. I'm going to move on because my time is short. I won't put you on the spot. We'll have further conversations about that FQHC. The last thing I wanted to get to is the issue of prosthetics. And we in New Hampshire are the home of something called the Luke arm. And I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's really an incredible advancement for prosthetics. It can literally reach down and pick up a grape, and it can reach overhead, which is it has not happened to date. And we'd love to put together a pilot for prosthetics and advanced prosthetics. And I'd love to work with you on that. So 9 seconds, if you have anything to add.
We would be happy to work with you on both of those.
Delightful. Thank you. I look forward to it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Commander, for the brevity of your answer, okay? Mr. Arrington, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I might get my Texas credentials revoked if I didn't say give it up once again for the great state of Texas and our veterans from the Lone Star State. All right, we got that out of the way. Love you guys. Chairman, I want to thank you and Ranking Member Walz for your leadership. You know, as a new member, I came to Washington, D.C. not just to change the course of this country for the good people that I represent in West Texas, but the culture of this country and the culture of Washington, really. It's broken. You know it. We all know it. But where it's not broken, the last bastion of bipartisan achievement is coming from this committee. 25 bills have passed the House, 12 have become law because we work together in a constructive way. We check our partisanship at the door and we put America first. Now, I know you guys, this is just my observation, but as the chairman of the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee, and I'm grateful for the leadership opportunity to serve you guys. Thank you for your service. Thank you, Commander, for your leadership and service. But it seems like every issue, whether it's the appeals process or it's health care related or it's home modification for our disabled veterans, you name it, at the heart of the issue is a broken culture, a failed system, a big bureaucracy that's failing our veterans. That's the heart of this. Now, we've done some good things to empower the VA leadership to change that culture for you guys. But let me tell you one of my biggest disappointments, it is the biggest disappointment since I've been on this committee, is that the GAO reported in my first hearing that there are hundreds of VA employees who spend 100% of their time on union activity. The law says that you can't administer official time or union activity unless it's reasonable, necessary, and in the best interest of the public. Now, there ain't anybody in West Texas that I've talked to, veteran or taxpayer, that believes that somebody spending 100% of their time on anything, then the job they were hired to do to serve the veterans is reasonable, necessary, and in the best interest of the public. I've got one word for it: outrageous. And I can't get enough help to get this bill out of the House, out of the Senate, and to the President's desk so we can add to the accountability reform, add to all these great things we're doing, and change the culture of the VA and serve you guys. Are you with me?
Yes.
I need your help. 100%. My bill just says we're not doing away with the unions. There are good people in unions. There are good people at the VA. The system's broken. This is part of it. And so my bill simply says if you're given direct patient care, no union activity. Everybody else, no more than 25% of your time. So, Commander, I'd be happy for you to address this, or anybody on your panel, but I'm not stopping. I'm not quitting. I will not give up on this issue. I'm coming for everybody on this until it's fixed. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding. And Senator Rounds, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me begin. I'm from the state of South Dakota, and I think I've got some members here from the VFW in South Dakota. Are you here yet, or have you already taken off? There you are, way in the back. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you for your service. I kind of thought maybe I was going to be the rabble-rouser here today, but somebody beat me to it. I understand, Mr. Chairman, that the VFW is supportive of the Caring for Our Veterans Act. I happen to think there are some very, very good items in there that are a long time in coming with regard to providing additional care for our veterans. But I have to be honest with you, I have real concerns. Johnny Isaacson from Georgia is absolutely a fantastic chairman in the Senate. He has been working overtime to bring consensus in our group. And the concern that some of us have expressed, and we've been working on it even this morning yet, we're concerned about the long-term longevity of choice. And I want to share why. I come from South Dakota. We're one of the 5 rural states in America. We got a whole lot of people that live more than 40 miles away from a VA facility. The reason why choice is there in the first place is because veterans came and said they weren't getting the service that they deserved from the institution of the VA. Choice has been very, very expensive. But one of the reasons why choice has been so expensive is because veterans across this country have voted with their feet. Those who have waited more than 30 days to get into a VA facility went someplace else where they could maybe get some service. People that live more than 40 miles away, they wanted an opportunity to perhaps take care of some of their medical needs that perhaps were not VA related in a community closer to where they lived. Now, under the proposal that's being discussed right now, and the concern that I have, and I really would like your thoughts on this because I think you folks have thought this out a little bit. Under the proposal, it would require the acceptance of both the VA and the individual veteran to agree to go outside of the VA. That means that the VA has a veto opportunity if that veteran wants to go and have his service outside the 40 miles and the VA disagrees. Now, the reason why this change is being proposed is because of cost. It's not because of improving services for the veteran. And in fairness to Secretary Shulkin, he is working his tail off to make things better, and I think he should have an opportunity to do so. And I want to work with him. Mr. Chair, or Commander Harmon, I would love you or a member of your group to perhaps give your thoughts about whether or not we need some kind of an assurance that the veteran really does have a choice in where they get their service, or if we should agree with the VA that they should have that veto authority over where that veteran gets his service in the future.
Senator, thank you very much for your hard work on fighting for veterans of South Dakota. And in our survey, first and foremost, our members tell us that they prefer to get their care from VA, and even when given the option to go outside, 60% of them choose to wait or travel further for VA. So there's an example from Black Hills that comes to mind as to what the issue is now, and we need to make sure that it doesn't occur again. There was a veteran, and you know Black Hills was shutting down, so VA said, well, to solve this issue, before we stand up Rapid Falls, you're going to go to the community. The veteran reported to us that their private sector provider wasn't giving them the care that he needed, and finally he was able to get into Rapid City. And frankly, what we want is veterans to receive the care certainly where they need it, but also veteran-centered care that's high quality and meets their unique needs. That's going to be in the private sector and in VA, but we can't have a one-sided approach.
If I could, one more.
Right ahead.
So does that mean we can't have the one-sided approach where the veteran makes the decision? Or is it that we can't have the one-sided approach where the VA makes the decision? Because under this provision, the VA has the final say on where that veteran gets their their health care. Which is it?
Senator, we do not believe that the VA or the veteran's doctor is a bureaucrat, and frankly, the veteran and their doctor should have the ability to decide what is medically necessary and what's in the best interest of the veteran. Frankly, if it makes sense for the veteran to go closer to home and not travel, 200 miles, then that's exactly what should happen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Next, I'll yield to my good friend, and actually, when we say that here, we usually don't like each other. In this case, I do. He is a good friend, Bill Cassidy from Louisiana.
Thank you, Dr. Rowe. First, shout out to my people from Louisiana. I know I have some folks whoa. And I would just like to point out that Camp Lejeune is named after a fellow who was born in Louisiana, and John Lejeune went to LSU before he went to the Naval. So North Carolina benefits from us. Well, what's new? And I also want to give a shout out to my veterans. Louisiana is one of the top 3 in the nation for veterans who served during wartime. So I want to thank my fellow Louisianians for answering the call in time of strife. Thank you for your service. I loved your testimony. Commander, you are right in line with some legislation that I will speak to that I'm introducing that I think y'all will like. I'm a physician, Dr. Rowe as well, but I'm a liver doctor. My joke yesterday is when I say I'm actually a hepatologist, but when you say hepatology, people think you do either snakes or venereal disease, and so, but I'm a liver doctor. And I've worked with a lot of people with transplants, and it just makes sense. The more transplants a transplant center does, the better your outcomes. The more likely the new organ survives, the more likely the person lives, the shorter time they spend in the hospital. We're introducing a bill that if a veteran lives near a private sector transplant center, that she or he could go to that nearby transplant center as opposed to being referred to the VA 1,000 miles away. Now, distance doesn't bother me as much, but if you look at the VA transplant centers, they don't do as many. And in some cases, their outcomes are not as good. So if you're in New Orleans and you have a chance to go to Oxnard, which may do 300 liver transplants a year and has the best outcomes in the country, as opposed to someplace else in the VA system which does 20 a year and which has only 70% as good outcomes as the New Orleans Center, why wouldn't you go to New Orleans if you live in New Orleans? And Commander, you said if the specialty service is not offered in the VA, that's when choice really comes into play. I would argue when it's offered but may not be as good. Because what we're talking about here are lives. As a hepatologist who has taken care of transplants, I know the experience of the center matters. And in this case, it matters for the person's life. And so I look forward to exploring that with you. We've heard some preliminary indications that VA might be opposed, but I don't know why. Because Secretary Shulkin at one point said the VA is about the veteran. It is not about the VA system. And I actually think that is the best, highest calling of all. Because for you, each of you made the decision that your life is about our country, more so than even your life. I thank you for that, and I will do my best to continue the ethic that you inspire us all with. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. And I don't know about Commander Harmon, but actually my country made that decision for me. I went to the mailbox, and so number 27 was my draft number. I will now yield to Lieutenant General Bergman, Chairman of the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee. General, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, who's here from Michigan? All right, all right. Well, you know, it's important to shout out for a lot of folks. And as I look at the first two guys right here, I see some familiar faces. Ryan and Bob, good to see you. As always, we've known each other for a few years now, but I'm a proud member, life member of VFW, have been since my father. You know, my father and a couple of his buddies, my dad was born in the Upper Peninsula, but he ended up, because of no work, ended up down a little farm town south of Minneapolis. But the point is, when they came back from World War II, like so many places, they started the VFW-proposed in honor of one of their buddies who had paid the ultimate sacrifice. So I grew up as a kid. My first sales job was Buddy Poppies. I had Buddy Poppies in one hand and a can with a coin slot in it in the other. This is before the advent of paper money. That's how old I am. But the point is what you do every day, not only for the veterans, but in your communities. And we know one of the challenges that every veteran service organization has, VFW included, is new members. In getting the newer veterans to get involved. So whatever we can do, whatever I can do personally as a VFW member to engage and encourage those young vets to get involved, I'm all in. And when speaking about all in, First District of Michigan is rural, very, very rural. And whatever we're talking about, but this case, let's just talk about veterans health care. If we can get our programs in health care delivery to work for veterans in the First District of Michigan, they'll work anywhere. And I'm going to add, I noticed in your statement here you talk about telemedicine.
Yes.
Thank you for supporting that because the movement towards telemedicine is about quality health care. And I think the partnership that you're going to see between the VA and, shall we say, non-VA medicine to deliver health care is the way we go future, with the VA being the lead dog in the pack to make sure that the veteran doesn't slip through the crack. So I'm going to ask just kind of for a consensus if you agree with my next statement. We have a unique opportunity here in combining the passion that you have for telehealth to be one, but veterans health care. Would you support as a whole a pilot project that it takes VA, let's say a VA facility with a local, maybe community hospital, that VA not a full service hospital, that the local hospital is, that we look at a pilot project to see where we can, without reinventing the wheel, provide better health care for veterans. This is a pilot project. Is that something that the VFW you think could get behind?
We could do that. Sure, I think that's something that we could seriously take a look at.
Good. Well, I thank you very much. I yield back. The time goes by quickly when you're among friends, so thank you very much for your service.
Thank you, General Bergman. Thank you. Now yield to Sergeant Major Walls.
Well, thank you, Commander. Thank you for your testimony, and thank you all for being here. Lieutenant General Bergman said he was just south of Minneapolis. That's just north of heaven, if you want to know. So, same area, but appreciate your passion. You can see it up here. We talk about these issues in the context of what's best to deliver for veterans. You see up here, we have differences and we have them out. And I know the gentleman from Texas, he and I have been working for the issues. He is a staunch advocate for our veterans. You get this right. This issue on official time, I always feel the need to bring it up. The official time is we've got folks that, yes, they're working. You have a nurse who's working on official time, not union dues, not collecting people, not recruiting people, but implementing policies that are coming down because VA doesn't have an HR. So if we have a new surgical procedure going, these things are coming down from management and they're being put through. I make the equivalent for all of you, why this is an issue for me, that I was paid and your tax dollars trained me to be a 13 Bravo artilleryman. Well, through attrition or whatever the heck, I end up being sergeant major. I didn't do artillery as a sergeant major, but I assisted in the implementation of being able to do so. So if the issue is that I was hired to be an artilleryman, I didn't do that the last 7 years, firing those shells, and the same thing in the VA. So there is an issue, and I'm not going to, the gentleman's commitment to getting this right for veterans is unquestioned. He is trying to get it there, but this issue is a little bit touchy, because it deals with how do we best deliver care in that system. We certainly want to hold people accountable, but this issue of these folks who are implementing care, I worry about. So we have tough issues. The Commander, I'm going to go back to you, and this is where you challenged the gentleman and I together to say we're going to hold you two accountable. We're going to ask you to work together. We're going to have you find solutions, and I think that is a noble cause and one that we should try and get to. I will end with this. When we first did sequestration, I went back to my home district, and people would ask me, what is sequestration? I would tell them it's Latin for dumb as hell, and that satisfied it, because they did not know what it was. So whether it is or not, we hear you. I would just leave us all with this as folks who want to get this right. It makes no sense to me why we would freeze a program that is doing something good, like national security or veterans care, instead of plussing it up. And it makes absolutely no sense to me why we would freeze a program that should be cut and eliminated. And sequestration maintains the status quo in a way that is really negative. And so your commitment to fixing this extends far beyond national security and veterans issues. It goes to fiscal health, fiscal responsibility. And to be very honest with you, it forces us to make the hard decisions. If I vote to spend money, then I should have the courage to say I voted to spend money or find where that money's coming from. So again, thank you all for being here. Understand that if you're not here, things will not get done right for veterans. So it's worth traveling here from all over. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. Commander, I want to just take a minute or two to thank your staff. With Carlos and Bob, you have a terrific group of people to work with.
Yes, we do.
I'm going to give them a shout out. I want to go over a couple of things. One, I've been here 9 years, and I'm an Army veteran, served in the 2nd Infantry Division in Korea, in the Medical Corps there with the 2nd Medical Battalion. Many of you probably been where I was stationed. And I never thought I would end up in the U.S. Congress. I never had any idea. I'm just a country doctor in East Tennessee. That's what I did. When I got here, I was put on the committee, and we were spending at that time $93.5 billion in 2009 for all VA care. That's health care, cemeteries, and benefits. And today, the President's budget, his ask this year, 10 years later, is $198 billion. And that's why the discretionary part of the budget almost didn't change during that time. So we took that money away from elsewhere. I think proudly you can look at both sides of the aisle and say, we looked at our veterans and said, we're going, even though there's a sequester there, whether you like it or not, that money went to VA. VA went from 250,000 employees to 373,000 employees today. And I would argue they're not spending that money as wisely as they should. And we look to your help to find out where they're not spending it so we can't. I mean, look at the Denver VA. What a disaster that was, getting that VA hospital built way over budget. So we need your help there. When you find things, ladies and gentlemen out there, please contact our office. If you see things that we can do to help that money be spent more wisely. That's one thing I wanted to get through. And again, the sequester, I agree, we're going to add $80 billion to our military. We lost 4 times as many people in training accidents last year as we did combat missions. That's wrong, and we need to fix that. And this Congress is doing that. We have 36% of the care the VA does today is care outside the VA. And I live in rural America. We're very blessed where we are to have a strong VA presence. But like Senator Rounds was saying, where he lives, maybe not, or Wyoming, or other places where people have to travel. My number one thing that I want to see happen is I want the veteran to get the best care wherever it may be. I served our group provided VA care, clinical care off the VA campus. We were all veterans in our group, and we served the VA in that capacity. So we're going to get this choice bill. I have worked very hard, and so has Congressman Walz in the last year, to try to get this choice bill where veterans help make the choice, and yet the VA was a very integral part of that care. Another thing I want to do, and a couple things in the few seconds I have left, the VA has a huge undertaking. It has to do with the quality of care we're going to be providing our people, and that's the implementation of the electronic health record. That is an enormous undertaking. And when you mentioned we're spending $4.5 billion on technology at the VA today, 80% of that money, Commander, is to support an aging system. 80% is just to keep the nuts and bolts on this thing now. And what it would do for me as a clinician out in the community, if I could access the cloud where we could get that information seamlessly about your record from the VA to me and backwards, that would be so much better in coordinating the care. And it's going to be a difficult probably 7 or 8 year process. And I think the Secretary is going to kick that off this year. This week, I mean. He's going to sign, I think, the contract. We'll see later in the week. I look forward to working with you guys. You've been terrific to work with on any number of issues that we've dealt with this past year, and I want to thank you for that. And I want to finish by thanking everyone in this room who came from very long distances to advocate for the men and women, 1.7 million people you represent, who've represented this great country. I grew up in a military town, Clarksville, Tennessee, where the 101st Airborne Division is. I know Sergeant Waltz, when I went in the Army, I thought the sergeants ran the military. That's what they told me anyway when I was a young captain, and they did. I've smartly let them do that. I want to finish by yielding to Congressman Walz and see if he has any closing comments. He does not. Again, thank you all. I can't thank you enough for coming here, Commander, and I look forward to this year. We've got a lot of things on our plate. I look forward to working with you and the VFW, and looking forward to meeting your membership and finding what your issues are and dealing with those. And with that, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and add extraneous material. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, sir. Yeah, thanks.